Are there, good morning, everyone. Are there any questions that you may have from our last discussions? Are there questions that you have from anything that came to your mind or something that you may have seen or heard this week? Okay. Last discussions that we had involved the Dogon. And I wanted to know if there are any questions concerning the Dogon or something that you did not understand about it.
Could you recap? Thank you.
Okay. When we talked about the Dogon, we talked about their understandings of the cosmos in relationship to being able to survive on the earth. They understood when to plant certain crops, but more interesting, they understood from the cosmos the movement of the planetary bodies. They understood the Sirius star system, and they said that that's where their origin is in that star system. And they were able to see not see, they knew that Saturn had rings around it, and they knew about the 4 moons of Jupiter. And so what was astonishing about it is that they knew all of this before the existence of telescopes, and they understood this based upon their unicity with the universe itself. They believed very strongly that we are one with the universe. It's something else interesting because the Sirius star is also called the dog star, and they are the Dogons. So I don't know whether there's a connection in there or not. They believe that the Earth, they knew rather, the Earth was subject to the phases of the moon. They understood that the Dogon star system was a sister planetary bodies to the sun itself. And one of the Sirius B, I think it is, one of the infrared planets, you cannot at all see it with your naked eye. It took huge magnification in order to find it through a telescope. So the question has always been, how did they get this information? So that's pretty much what we talked about, unless someone else would like to help me do an overview. Any questions?
Hey y'all, this is Nick. Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that, just the general idea that the ability to learn about the universe and everything in it comes from our ability to investigate the nature of self. And as it is said, there is a universe contained within each of us, and the universe we see external to us is an expression of that universe contained within each of us. And so I think the Dogon and other cultures like them who had knowledge of the universe were part of that lineage of spiritual tradition that taught them how to know themselves and therefore know the universe, because it is a sort of physical representation of the true nature of the cosmic self, I think is a good way to describe it.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else? I think it's interesting also that the Dogon ancestors were the people of Mundi, the people who are built the empire, Mali, and they when the empire fell, they moved. They migrated to a different area of Mali, and we don't know whether they did that for protection or whether they did that simply because they were led to. It seems as though there was some type of conflict that caused the empire to collapse, and they migrated to a different place for safety reasons. However, I also believe that they migrated to a different place because the universe was protecting the knowledge that they had, and the universe was making sure that the acquired knowledge would not be lost. And that acquired knowledge right now is available, has always been, but more so now available to us as an example of who we are. And when we do this introspection, understanding that we're the universe and the universe is us, then we have opportunity to have those same experiences. I also believe that it is not necessary for us to have the same type of experiences, but the same experiences that they had in understanding the energy flows from Sirius star system and how those energy flows influenced life on this planet, as well as the influence of the universal wisdom that's available to us for the express purpose of bringing balance to this earth. Questions or comments about that?
Pastor, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I yield.
No, go ahead. No, you go first.
Well, I was just going to say, I've been researching a lot, but you can't find but so much on the Dogon. And I do believe that the more I search that, things will start coming to me, because I am interested in what's in the Dogon tribe. And I don't know where to look. I don't know where else to look, but I do believe it'll come to me. But I just want to put that out there.
Well, let me share this with you. One of the reasons research is limited to when you start doing research is because it's not time for you to see it. How many years did we seek to understand the scriptures from the Aramaic, and we could not find anything out there? However, when the time came, we were able to find everything. Right now, it's not time. The other reason is that there's so much stuff to sift through, and there may be some people, and I'm not just saying you, Evelyn, but some people who are unable to sift through it. And there are things out there that were written by Europeans who actually doubt the validity of the Dogon's statements and belief system, even though they have already been proven. And then there are those who cling to the Galilean understanding of the planets and their movement, because they're not going to accredit an African with that, even though this was understood long before Galileo walked the face of this earth. So those are the types of things you have to sift through. But not only that, you have to sift through the understanding of any history or any notions of people of color. If you don't sift through the origins of the Hebrews, you would think the Hebrews were the same people who occupy Israel right now, where they are not. There are people who are on this phone and in other places who cannot imagine that a Hebrew was a person of color. They can't imagine that Jesus was a person of color. And even I have spoken with some people of European derivation, and when it comes to Jesus being a man of color, they don't say that it has to be because of where he lived and because everybody around him were. They say that it's a possibility, and that saying is a possibility, or maybe so. That is a form of racism. That's a racist thought that does not want to admit what they know the truth to be. Does that make sense, Evelyn? If you're talking, I can't hear you, babe. Did I lose everyone?
Oh no, we're here.
We're here.
Oh, okay. So I'm saying that a lot of times when you can't find stuff, just post it now. Let me add one more thing, okay? There are books that we research that we don't talk about the name of the books. Why? Because there is so much information in some of those books that you have to sift through in order to get to the truth. And there's so much technical information in some of those books until you can go down the rabbit hole easily and miss the whole point of what you're searching for. Okay, I'm done. Go ahead. Was that you, George?
Yeah, good morning, Pastor. Yeah, I just wanted to, mention as you were, just speaking in reference to, the Dogon, something that, we talked about in reference to the creation story of the Dogon. And I know in terms of you mentioning that, we know that there's various creation stories. However, to be able to that it all relates to the oneness in terms of us having an understanding of creation. So when we talk about the Dogon, I think I mentioned it maybe 2 weeks ago in reference to the book of Genesis. And I think you were referring to how that creation story, how it was comparative in reference to the Dogon creation story, and at the same time beginning to realize the significance, of the waters, and at the same time how it came to revelation in terms of where we are today. And so I think that as we continue to, seek, I know we have said in the past that, we would, be, if the student is ready to learn, the teacher will appear. And I think that as we, begin to appreciate the Dogon creation story, we can see how it relates to Genesis in the book of the Bible. So I just wanted to, see if there was any more that you can expound upon in terms of how we compare creation stories, but more importantly, how it relates to the Bible and the creation story of the Dogon. It resonates.
The creation story of not only the Dogon, but of other civilizations are in Africa. are more in depth than the creation story that we read in the Bible. The creation story for example, the creation story of the Cushite, it even talks about, alludes to everything being made from atoms, atoms, and it gives a more simplified yet in-depth story of how creation came into being. The Genesis story is a synopsis of that, and I do understand that. The Genesis story is a synopsis of that because it was told by a group of people who lived thousands of years after the creation story was written in Egypt. Well, I should say Hakupata, because Egypt was never intended to be a nation. Hakupata is the original name of the area that's called Egypt, and Hakupata means the hill or the house of Ptah, meaning that no different than saying this is the house of God. We make references to that all the time, and in that story, we find, as I said, a more in-depth understanding. The difficulty with it is that we have been indoctrinated not to believe anything other than what we have been told. If it does not appear in the quote-unquote Western literature, forget it. It's not important. That's what we've been taught. And I promise you, when I say Western literature, I'm also talking about the Bible. And the reason I am talking about it is because the Bible that we were given did not come from God. The Bible we were given came from King James. And that's the reason the translations are so vague or so far off base, because the King James was translated from the Greek Septuagint and way off base. However, the one that we got from our Creator is better understood through the Aramaic and Hebrew languages. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, and again, I appreciate you, responding to that, because it made me think about, Genesis, the first chapter, and I think we talked about it before, just maybe briefly in reference to verse number 2. And in verse number 2 of Genesis chapter 1, it says, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." Now, with the Dogon, they talk about the concept, in terms of the god Amma and the god Numo. And it referred to, the waters, the primordial waters. And so I was just trying to look at the comparison of, realizing that water is significant. And I know we talked about it, but I think that there's still that connection, when we talk about the creation story in terms of the importance of creation. And so I'm just trying to look at that foundation to realize that if everything was in the waters and matter was there, how, again, the Dogons talked about that creation story in terms of the importance of polarity or duality, when it comes to the four pairs. But again, down the road, Pastor, I guess, if that needs to be discussed, we will. But I think that as we in an exciting time, where we need to truly, when it says know thyself, or to be able to appreciate the creation story, is just fascinating and encouraging to be able to compare, the stories. I'm done.
Thank you, George. You're absolutely right. Every creation story involves water. And every creation story involves spirituality. Every creation story not only involves the waters of the deep, but creation stories involve man in with the water as well. There is no birth without fluid, ambient fluid, which is water as well. So when we think about it, that's what we are, water itself. And that is one of the reasons the water is so common to us. One of the reasons also walking through the grass grounds you is because the same elements in the earth is in the body. So all of these things come together to show us a picture, not only how we were created, but also a picture of how everything that we see with our eyes was created, and everything that we perceive with our eye was created. So these stories can actually be written side by side, and you can see the similarities in all of them, because all of them come from the same source. Questions or comments? Okay.
This is Barbara.
Ma'am?
This is Barbara. The only thing I thought about as you were talking was the tribe on the Black Panther, and what people saw was a third world country, people living off the land in a pastoral setting, no modern conveniences, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you really look behind all of that, they were a people of knowledge and inventiveness and spiritualism, and they were so much more than what was presented to people at first glance. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. In actuality, Barbara, I not when I saw the movie, but in subsequent years, what I thought about is that Black Panther is it's a continuation of the Kushite kingdom. I thought that it was giving us an image of who we are without anyone really paying it any attention. That makes sense?
Yeah.
There are so many realities that are hidden in fictitious writing or fictitious movies. They speak volumes to who we are. The idea of Wakanda, though it's fictional, it speaks to something in us. The question becomes, how is it, why is it rather, that we felt such an affinity for something that was presented in such a fictitious manner? Matter of fact, a comic book image. Excuse me. Why did we feel so close to it? Why did it feel like it's a real part of us? Could it possibly be because it is? That what we were experiencing was the images of who we are, who we were, and who we shall always be. So I do believe that that's one of the strong images that was there, that was presented. Not to mention the reality that the star in the movie, it wasn't long before he exited his body after the movie. So sometimes movies educate us, give us a better education than the school does. And definitely the theaters, the writers in the theaters have better images of spirituality than the church does. So I think all of these things are seemingly coincidental. However, they are not. They are more informational. They're more. They are have a greater affinity for bonding us together. And I remember very clearly that one of the statements, and I pretty much paraphrasing what Bill Maher said, was, why is it that people get all excited over a fictional character, the Black Panther? This is the whole point, because he's ignorant of the Kushite kingdom and how it relates to our existence. But more importantly, it's in our DNA. And that's why we have such an affinity for it. Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions?
This is Audrey. I think I talked about this book that I had been reading when I talked about the struggle with duality, the struggle with opposites rather. It's called The African Genius by Basil Davidson. And in it, he talks about various African tribes, including the Dogon, who, sorry, hold on a second. In it, he's talking about various African tribes, including the Dogon. And he talks about them from the perspective of their spiritual beliefs, not anything to do with Christianity or anything like that. It's just their basic spiritual beliefs that they held for centuries, even before Muslims or Christians or whatever came to Africa. And I think it's interesting that in the Dogon myth of creation, it has all the elements that we know of in Christianity, that we, even including some of the beliefs of the Hebrews, of the sages, I mean, about the first beings being twins, that kind of thing. And I think it's interesting that according to the Dogon myth, that it was the male part, it was the male essence of those twins that sort of brought, for lack of a better word, evil into the world. Not the female, but the male. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, the statement that you just made in regards to that is true. Male energy is what not only brought but perpetuates the evilness or the darkness in this world through masculine domination.
Yeah, I should have said darkness, not evil, but anyway.
Any other questions or comments about the Dogon? Okay. Any other questions about anything else?
First, I would like to mention that Viola Davis has a movie that's coming out called Woman is King. And I think it's gonna It's coming out this month, as a matter of fact. I think the 16th. And I'm putting that out there because we're talking about the woman and everything. And I think that's going to be a very good movie for everybody to see.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. We also talked about how we got to the place of how we got to where we are. Excuse me. In regards to spirituality, one of the things that Audrey mentioned was the reality of spirituality being prevalent long before there was Christianity or Islam. And when we look at the reality of Islam, it simply speaks to one who believes in God or something like that, one who walks with God. It does not label a religion. The labeling of that religion came not from the African, but from Europeans, just like Christianity being labeled did. And it's totally different than what the originators of this idea of spirituality were talking about. Because when we talk about Muhammad or Jesus, we don't see them trying to establish a religion as much as it is getting people to a place of understanding the nature of their spirituality. I've read the Quran, and I've not seen in the Quran where a religion was being established, but I have seen in the Quran a direction to live a life of spirituality, as I have also in the Bible. I've seen that. In Christianity, I've not seen that. In Christianity, all I've seen is this theory of the Philosopher Kings. And that theory of the Philosopher King is control at any cost. And the whole structure of Christianity is about domination and control. It's about manipulation. It is about the enslavement of the mind as well as the body, as opposed to the freedom to choose the direction you want to travel in. Hold 1 second, please. Okay, the direction that you want to travel in, and anytime we mention a denominational religion, it goes back to the same sources. A group of people who seek to dominate, and they are the ones who label these religions because the foundation of the intellect comes from a desire to separate for the purpose of control, and that's exactly what denominations do. They separate for the purpose of control, and even within the denominations, you have subdivisions that does the same thing. There were no divisions of the Shiite and Sunni until after Muhammad's death. There was no establishment of this thing called Christianity until years after Jesus' death. So what I'm seeing as a common thread is that if it comes from the same source, then it has the same purpose. So I want to see, before I go further, if there's anyone who has any comments or questions about that. Or can you see the principle?
Yes. And as you mentioned, very much the case with Christianity. There was nothing called Christianity. There was no sort of collection of the quote unquote official beliefs of Christianity until hundreds and hundreds of years later, after many of the original sort of spiritual nature of the practices and teachings had been suppressed, in order to use the religion, the sort of newly founded religion of Christianity, quote unquote, as a tool of essentially Roman imperialism, which is basically the model for so-called Western society is Roman imperialism.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else?
Just to add to that, even today as well, adding to what Nick was saying, Christians are weaponizing Christianity against those who call themselves Christians. In other words, we've been saying we are Christians for so long that now you got this group of Christians who are carrying it well beyond, as Nick said, the intent of the original teachings, and are saying that unless you do this or unless you do that, you are not Christian. You are one of the demons. And so I believe that is putting a lot of people in the position of having to really look at themselves and look at the Christians that they are and answer the question, am I really what they say, or is there something different, wrong with Christianity if that's what they say it is? So it's causing, I think, many people to pause and ask questions, and hopefully to seek. They really are.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions or comments?
Good morning, everyone. From my observation, I don't think Christianity is the bad person here. What I do feel is Christianity is submissive to the Catholic Church. And I think the Catholic Church is the goat that leads the sheep of Christianity. And the reason why I say that is when we look at the Ten Commandments, and I don't even know the Ten Commandments. Yet what I do know is the one commandment that is not in the Ten Commandments is to own another person, slavery. For a person not to be a slave or a person to own another person. And that comes from the Catholic Church. They believed in slavery. They committed the first genocide, even with their own people, and they migrated into Spain and Greece and Persia, Africa, Kemet, Egypt. So I just don't feel that Christianity bad person here. I see Christianity as being submissive to what the Catholic Church tells them to do. I do feel Christianity has done and is doing the dirty work for the Catholic Church. So that's just how I look at it. And if anyone disagrees with me, voice your concern, or if anyone supports that, voice your concern, because I may not be seeing it correctly. Thank you.
Well, Christianity is the weapon developed by the Catholic Church, so they're one and the same. You can't separate Christianity from Catholicism, because it's no different than making an attempt to separate a baby born from the womb that it was born in terms of saying that it doesn't belong to them. They're separate entities, yes, but you cannot deny the reality that it came from that womb, which means that it's going to have some of the traits of the womb that it came from. Christianity has the same traits as Catholicism. There are very little differences between the two. The Romans the Romans took the scriptures and developed them into a weapon called Christianity. However, the structure for Christianity did not come from the Catholics. The structure for Christianity came from the Greeks. How can I put this so I can stay? When Europeans talk about Western civilization, they're talking about the civilization that started in Greece. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Whenever you hear the term Western civilization, that's a euphemism for white supremacy. If civilization started in Greece, then that means that nobody else is civilized before the Greeks. The principles of Greek civilization is control. I spoke last week about the Plato's Republic, or the what is it? The chosen state, the ideal state rather, from Plato. The ideal state from Plato speaks to how the society should be structured. And if we look at the structure of the ideal state from Plato, we will see the Catholic Church as well as Western government. Hold on 1 second, please. I'm back. Hello? Hello?
We hear you.
We're here.
Yeah, what we see is the society of the West, of Western government, and we see also the structure of the church. What am I saying? If we look at the ideal state, what is it? It has three categories according to Plato, and those categories are, oh my God, the artisan, which means that there's a group of people who create things, who make things, and it's not just pertaining to those who paint on the canvas or those who make sculptures. This is talking about people who bring anything into existence, whether it be a chair or whether it be a portrait. It doesn't matter. Everything in between. The auxiliaries. The auxiliaries are those who they're the warriors, and their responsibility is to defend the state. They have a affinity for the defense of the state. And then there are the Philosopher Kings, and the Philosopher Kings are the ones who believe that everyone should stay in their place in terms of what they can offer to the state. And the Philosopher Kings are the ones who determine what they can offer to the state. And the reason the Philosopher Kings should be the rulers is because they are devoid of emotions. They have learned to conquer their emotions, which is also another way of saying they have no sense of spirituality at all. They believe that anyone who is expressive of emotions is someone who is too weak to lead not only a nation, but to be a leader, period. That's the foundation of Greco society, but it's also the foundation of the society that we live in. And we talk about these older white men who are in charge of everything, including the Catholic Church, as well as inclusive of religion itself. What do we see? We see these old men who feel like no matter what they say is right. And just like in the ideal state, Plato writes that it doesn't matter whether the people understand what the laws are. Their only responsibility is to obey the laws. And if they don't, there are consequences. So all of these things are interwoven into the structure of the society that we live in. And the Philosopher Kings also believe that there's always the other. There's always somebody other than them that is different than them because they're not as smart as they are. They don't have the intellectual capacity to be a philosopher king. And when you look at the way the church is structured, it's always the other. It's the pastor and the others, as opposed to all of us being one. When we look at the structure in relationship to how spirituality works, spirituality believes, the spiritual one believes that everything is one. It believes that everything, the universe and earth consciousness are one. And it believes that we are one with everything in the earth, nature, the cosmos, everything is one. However, that is not the belief of the Greek society, which is not the belief of our society. And guess what? Anyone who is spiritual is considered to be too emotional to lead anything, to be a leader. And those who have the greatest emotions are the ones who are supposed to be enslaved, because they have to be told what to do and when to do it, because they cannot make those decisions for themselves. Is that not a description of the society that we live in? Is that not a description of the churches that we have attended? That's not rhetorical. I'm seeking comment, questions.
Rev, for clarity reasons, Greece did change the vocabulary somewhat. Jesus is not his correct name. Yet in order for them to change some vocabulary, did the Greeks just change that on their own, or did the Greeks have to consult with the Persians, conquered them, and did the Persians have to run that information back up to Rome, or did Rome tell Persia what to tell Greece to do? Know what, Reverend Richard?
The philosophers of Greece set the standards for what they called intellect in the Western world. They didn't run it up to no tree to nobody. When Socrates died, Plato and Aristotle hit the road, and what they wrote became the foundation of the Greek society, which became the foundation of European society, and they did not run it up the flag to nobody. They put it out there, and it began to take hold. What they did, Plato did not believe in a democracy at all. He felt that a democracy was impossible to maintain because of the immorality of men and the weakness of their intellect. So when he wrote the ideal state, he was writing that because he was describing something that he felt was better than the system of democracy that Clemens or somebody had brought into existence prior to Plato's existence. And what actually happened in Europe, they took the Greek outline of Plato, of the mindset rather, and that of democracy, and they meshed them together, which means that we do not have a democracy. We have a republic in this country, and most nations have a republic and not a democracy. And the republic is when you elect people to represent you, and right now that's what we do. We elect people to represent us, but they don't represent us, and that's what Plato was talking about when he talked about the immorality of those who are supposed to be in a representative democracy. And all of this plays in, and there are those on this phone who are thinking that we are not talking about the Bible, but we really are. This is the foundation for Christianity. This is the foundation for the manipulation of Islam. This is the foundation for the separation of people of color, especially Africans, from everybody else in the world, especially Caucasians, because everyone knows that the most spiritual people on the face of this earth are Africans. It's in our DNA to be spiritual, and that is one of the reasons we have a greater affinity for those things that appear to be spiritual, i.e. the religions that we engage in or those practices. So no, it was the Greeks, the foundation of the Greeks, that all of this is built upon. And when I talk about the representative, the republic rather, look at what happens. 99% of everyone in government does not represent the people who put them there. They represent their own interests. And the reason they represent their own interests is because they feel like they are philosopher kings. They are smarter than the ones who put them there. So they go there, do what they want to do, then they come back to those who elected them and lie to them. And because of the way society is structured, even with the news media, the lies are sold to people because they truly don't understand how government works. It is so confusing to them because they don't understand how it works, but also there's so much hidden from them, and they don't seek to understand it. Right now, there are people who don't even know how many branches of government it is and the function of each and how they interact with each other. You have a judge sitting on a bench who does not understand executive privilege and where it exists. So this is a society that is corrupt by ignorance, and the corruption of the ignorance comes from the Philosopher Kings. Does that make sense, George?
Reb, I agree with you. I just ain't gonna get it in one discussion.
That's fine.
Yet, do discussions on it. But I agree with everything you're saying. I just don't get things on the first go round. But I agree. Thank you.
Uh-huh. And this whole idea of the emotions comes from the interaction that Plato and Aristotle had with those who were in the place called Egypt. The libraries that they spent time in, they saw how the society was structured, but they also saw how easily the people capitulated to the wars that were waged there by Europeans. They were too emotional, according to these philosophers, to defend themselves physically. They did not have the auxiliary, the warrior types whose only purpose was to fight wars. they did not have that in place, and that's why there was so much pillaging taking place, or in the area called Egypt, and that is the reason it was easier for imperialism to come into being. Colonialism, all of these are based upon the foundation that was laid in Greece. And they took, when you spoke of Jesus, the Greeks simply took control of the scriptures, and in doing so, the reason they wrote the name Zeus is what the Greeks call Jesus. Actually, it's because the sun god. So the name Jesus in the Greeks came from Zeus. So here we are with someone worshiping the sun, giving prestige or a religious order to what the scriptures are saying, which is within itself is confusing. And that is the reason that when Europeans look at the scriptures, they see them as being literal as opposed to them being spiritual, because they, based upon what they are, their thinking patterns, there is no spirituality. You must conquer that. You must control that. And that's why we see the Southern Baptists. That's why we see the priests. That's why we see the ecclesiastical orders making every attempt to control what is said and understood about religion. Because if you allow the true understanding of it, then you are facilitating a society that is too emotional/spiritual to make decisions for the benefit of the society. I'm done. Questions or comments? And please give me pushback if it's there.
Pastor, I don't have a pushback, but I just wanted to relate to what George Watson was speaking of in terms of the Ten Commandments. If we look at, the early, human family, and we look at it, in terms of just the Mayakian principles, we can look at and see, that the Ten Commandments basically, was taken from earlier laws that our ancestors.
Stop you for 1 second, please.
Go ahead.
The Mayat principles are principles that speak to the way the world should be ordered for the benefit of humanity. Go ahead.
Yes, and so with that, I think, again, if we begin to appreciate the 42 laws, that basically was written where several other Ten Commandments was actually taken from that, we can begin to see when you talk about the language or the linguistics, in terms of the interpretations, it gives us an earlier foundation to be able to appreciate where it originated from. So I think that in terms of just, being aware of that, even for myself, it really helped me to be able to go to an earlier point of knowing, and an earlier point of these 42 affirmations, because if we compare the two, in the King James Version, it talks about, the Ten Commandments in terms of thou shalt not kill. But when we look at the 42 affirmations, or the 42 affirmations of Mayat, it talks about I will not. And I think that there's a big difference in terms of it being written for the purpose of these are the laws that you should abide by. But that's something that we don't have to do. But I think it's just interesting to look at that, comparison between the Ten Commandments and the 42 laws. And I think that will help us, or I know would help me to better understand how to discern that. I wanted to share those thoughts. I'm done, Pastor.
Thank you, sir. Again,
sorry, go ahead.
The Mayat principles compared to the Ten Commandments is no different than the writings that looks at the creation stories from the Eastern mindset, as well as the creation story from Genesis. So all those things are comparative in nature that George is talking about. Thank you. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask a question and maybe push back a little bit too, because when you were talking about Aristotle and Plato, all those guys went down to Kemet to study, math and philosophy and all those things. And in Egypt, all those things had a spiritual basis. They weren't just being studied for whatever. It was part of a spiritual, the whole spiritual thing. But Plato and Aristotle took it back to Greece and then put their own slant on it and made it more mundane as opposed to spiritual. So I think a lot of those principles are good and right. It's just that they've been corrupted by we might say today, instead of giving the people the information, somebody kept it to themselves and went and wrote a book to make money off it. So in a sense, Plato and Aristotle and all those guys basically wrote their book so they could make their money and they could be famous. But I think the essence of those principles was really good. They've just been corrupted.
Audrey, as you say what you're stating, I concur, because I know that we've been, blessed, or we've been, enlightened by being able to see the importance, of reading the Stolen Legacy, being able to understand the Memphite text, being able to understand the pyramid text, and I think that in those readings, it gives us a much in-depth insight in terms of not just how intelligent we were, and more importantly with our ancestors, how, they were able to, read the signs of the time or have that intimacy, with a galactic family, or being able to look at it, from those aspects of the organic life. So all what, you're saying, again, I concur, and I just, appreciate us talking about the origin of spirituality, because as we've said in the past, spirituality, before in the book by Cabernet, he talks about spirituality before religion, and so we can see that again, spirituality is unseen science, and science is seen spiritually, and I think with our ancestors, or even with the Dogon, as Pastor mentioned, with the Sirius, star, they were able to see what was hidden. And I think it all relates to it now coming to the light, that we're able to see that Stargate opening, where we are now, again, continue to receive and give. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank both of you.
Just
Go ahead.
Just for confirmation, for my own clarity, I'm not aware of Aristotle ever going into Kemet. I've never read it. However, I am aware of Aristotle having a union with Alexander the Great going into Kemet. Did Aristotle go into Kemet, or was that just Alexander the Great? And I'm not saying whoever posed that question that they're correct or they're wrong. I'm just saying that I've never read where Aristotle went into Kemet.
Aristotle spent years in the libraries of Egypt, studying the manuscripts, and he and Plato saw the manuscripts of spirituality, and as Audrey said, they rendered them as being mundane, and they actually put their twist on them. Actually, Plato believed that the foundation of understanding anything was mathematics, and he definitely got that from the libraries of of Egypt or / Kemet, and they the both of them studied there, but it was against the wishes of the Greek Senate, but they did it anyway at the behest of Alexander the Thief. And what they did, they brought back copies of what they found, and in doing so, that's how they got to that's how Plato in particular, and Aristotle as well, because Aristotle was a huge racist. But anyway, the way Plato got to his conclusions was by seeing that spirituality and emotions were the same. That's how he saw it. And when he saw the emotions of the inhabitants, he derived at his theory about them being incapable of leadership and making decisions because they were too emotional to do it. They get caught up in getting it done, as opposed to standing back, making the decision, and influencing or forcing everyone else to follow the decisions that were made, separate from emotions, separate from spirituality. And to this day, that's a difficult understanding for Europeans to understand the nature of spirituality. And we see that in so many different ways, even in our society today. And I will give you an example. When you see an African preacher in the pulpit, he is exciting. He gets caught up. His emotions, the congregation get caught up in their emotions. And though the word that they are preaching is different than the original, they are still in that state of excitement that they inherited from others before them. And as a result of that, Caucasians do not want them to preach in their churches. You can sing in their church, but you can't preach there. They don't even want you to pray there because they don't believe that we are capable of quote unquote reaching God. So again, I see this as a picture of the Greco society. I see that same image when I look at the governmental entities. The governmental entities and the quote-unquote Christian entities, especially in America, mirror each other. They are hand in hand with each other. And we say, not really, oh, yes, they are, because had it not been for Christianity, Trump wouldn't be where he is. Had it not been for Christianity, McConnell would not be where he is. So we see the mirroring of Christianity and the government itself, and the more that we find people walking away from Christianity, the more we see people becoming more spiritual in their thinking, and that is and because of that, we began to move in the direction of a more equitable society. Questions, comments? Help you, George.
So, Reb, and question to everyone, in these books that Aristotle obtained and was privileged to, where are those books located? Did they get rid of them? Did they burn them? Are they in a safe passage? Where are these books? What
the
took
ones
place?
that are not in the Catholic dungeons are burned. Alexander burned books for weeks in Egypt. Now, don't get me wrong. There are places more than likely where they are being hidden. I don't doubt that at all. Mesopotamia had great libraries as well, and so did the Mali Kingdom. kingdoms of West Africa had huge libraries, as did but they came after the kingdom, the Kushite kingdom in Egypt.
And I want to add to that, you can find a lot of that information just in more bits and pieces, as well as other books that are still around. That information hasn't been lost. It was just very difficult to find for a long time. When you look at books like the Hermetica or the Kybalion and the Emerald Tablets, those are things that come directly out of the spiritual mystery tradition that was present in Egypt, that for a long time, if you wanted to be a learned man, and you were definitely a man back then, you went to Egypt to learn. That was the place you went for a long, long time. And one of the, I stepped out for a bit, so my apologies if anybody mentioned him, but one of the greatest of the Greeks who spent a long time in Egypt learning, and also one of the earliest, was Pythagoras. And Pythagoras was probably, of the ones I'm aware of, was closest to the actual sort of true spiritual and occult depth that was present in what was available to be learned in Egypt, if you were deemed worthy enough to go that far. And I believe he was one of the very few coming out of Greece and maybe other places of Europe that were admitted into that degree of learning. But even he, in an attempt, I think, to translate those concepts into things his sort of European contemporaries could understand, focused more on the, I guess you could say, practical application of the mathematics and etc. that he learned, which is fine, but it was nevertheless a sort of watering down of the original intention. But anyway, I just wanted to bring him up because I'm sure all of us remember the Pythagoras triangle from school. For some reason, that just sticks in a lot of our brains. But that comes directly out of Egypt, and those mathematics come directly out of Egypt. I'm done.
Thanks, Nick. Any other questions? Comments? Conclusion? Go ahead.
Audrey mentioned earlier this morning about the women's role or lack of, and all of this is connected, even as we start off with the Greeks, and we talk about that control, and George mentioned it starting off in the Catholic Church. All of that can be seen here today in the United States. And not too long ago, I went to upstate New York to the Women's Rights Museum, and it was very insightful about what I saw and what I learned, and it showed the difference in society in terms of the Native American women here in New York with the different tribes compared to the settlers, the European, I guess, base for society. And the women's rights movement in the United States was pretty much not pretty much, but it was patterned off, or at least they actually looked at the Native American society and seeing the role of women there in order to fight for women's rights here. And we talk about that, I'm going to explain some of those differences, but before I explain some of those differences, I want to explain that how we talk about the spiritual traditions of Egypt, and we talk about Western society and how it is completely different. And one of the reasons, or not one of the reasons, the reason why it's so different is a natural effect of there being that blockage, that control that Pastor Richard was just talking about. Just as in the body, if there's something as there's a blockage, then there's a imbalance and things are not working in harmony. In the same exact way, men being in control of everything, or the femininity, has the same effect, just as in the physical as in the spiritual, and our ability to see our experience and operate in the world, etc. There is no balance. Things are not flowing naturally and properly working together with one another. So say that first and foremost. Now for the stark differences between the Native American women and their rights compared to the European. And remember, I'm only saying this, giving an example of Western society in comparison to one that is a lot more freer. So we're starting off, I'm gonna say this first. The main principle here is not that just that the Native American women had more rights. It was that the femininity in the women were actually looked at as being equals, or in high regard, or as being important. So even though they may have had different roles, it was an understanding of that balance, and all these roles were just as important, and it wasn't that one role or one entity was actually ruling over the other one. So, and some of this may be known by everyone, some people on here, and some of it may not. So first of all, a lot of indigenous tribes or groups across the world have more of a matriarchal society, meaning that when children are born, the children's lineage or their heritage is looked at as being through the mother and her mother and her mother, etc. Not the male, which is more so of a Western thing. Violence against women for Native Americans culture was dealt with seriously when it occurred. Clothing fostered health, freedom, movement, and independence, meaning that their clothing was loose, it wasn't restrictive, compared to, at the time around 1848, those dresses with those big, giant, like bell-looking bottoms, which would have like up to 80 pounds of pressure, tight shoes that would squeeze the feet, and things like that. Even to that part was controlling. And in the Native American society, women's responsibilities has a spiritual basis. Now compare that to the European. Children are the property of their fathers, not members of the mother's clans, but properties of their fathers. Husbands have legal rights and religious responsibility to physically discipline their wives. Clothing, as I said, restrictive, unhealthy, and dangerous. And women's subordination has religious foundation. So the controlling of the women came directly through the religion, which of course had its roots in Greece in the Catholic Church, but still seen here, not only then, I think in 1848, but today, right now as well. Going from an economic standpoint, for the Native American women, work satisfying, done communally, responsible for agriculture as well as home life, work done in the direction of women working together. Each woman controls her own personal property. European side, work drudgery, isolated, responsible for home and subordinate to husband, work done under authority of husband, no rights to her own property, body, or children. We talk about spirituality and the lack of from a Western society standpoint. And in talking about that spirituality, we talk about Western society not, I won't say involving women, but not letting the femininity play a role at all whatsoever. For the Europeans, no female in the Godhead, women responsible for sin, spirituality not connected to earth, women forbidden to speak, responsibilities subordinate to men's authority. We look at the Native Americans, you have the sky woman, the spiritual being, catalyst for the earth, Mother Earth and women's spirituality interrelated. Women have responsibilities in ceremony, responsibilities in balance with those of men. Totally different from the two. And then the last one, from a political standpoint, and this also ties to what Pastor Richard was talking about in terms of the Philosopher Kings and the control, which we can see throughout everything I've said. There's been an element of a lot of control as it relates to the Western society. For the Euro-American, illegal for women to vote, women arrested for voting, women excluded from political office. Common law defines married women as dead in the law. Decision making by men, majority rules. Compared to that of the Native American women, women have equal voice with men in decisions. Women and men have equivalent and equal governing responsibilities. Confederacy law ensures women's political authority, decision making by consensus, everyone has a voice. Even to the point where the treaties of the 6 tribes were actually signed by the women. And women had veto power in terms of choosing the leader who, I don't want to say ruled over them, but was just the leader, and also had veto power at any point. They could get rid of that leader. But more importantly, we're not just talking about rights here. We're talking about the actual acknowledging and holding in high regard femininity. So going back to what I mentioned in terms of our own bodies or how an organism works, period, there is a balance, and each part plays just an important role, because if any part is not functioning properly or has the proper balance, then the entire organism is affected. I'm finished.
Any questions or comments about what Sheldon just said? I see that real clearly, and I'm sure that everyone else does, and how the role that it plays in religion. Women are the servants and speak when they're spoken to, yet they're expected to hold everything together. Men are in control, and that masculine energy has thrown everything in this world off kilter. And in order for it to be right again, it's going to take masculine energy to make it right. No different than you can't stop anyone from being a racist. That's a decision they have to make. And men are the ones who are out of place, and they're pushed everyone else out of place. And I'm speaking totally in reference to when people talk about women got their place, she's got her place now. Men are out of place. Masculine energy is out of place and has pushed everything else out of place. all energy forces have been pushed out of place, and men have made every effort to displace what they've moved so that they can stay where they are throughout eternity. That is the thing that brings imbalance, and that is the thing that Jesus taught us to bring balance to. And that is the journey that we're on, to bring balance to that. It is not anyone dominating anyone. It's everyone making sure that they are in a place of responsibility for the whole of humanity and take that responsibility serious. Questions or comments? Or Sheldon, does that fit pretty much what you're talking about?
That does fit. Well, before I say anything else, are there, as Pastor Richard said, are there any other questions or comments?
I have a comment. I can relate to what Sheldon's saying because I look at, and I know the thing about the church, how the women have to sit there. We were only limited to do but so much. But Melania Trump, to me, is a perfect example of how the European men treat women. That's all I want to say. Because out of all the president's women or wives, they were some of them. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but Melania Trump and Trump is just totally different. I have never seen anything like this before, as far as with the Europeans. That's all I want to say.
Anyone else? Any comments?
I agree with you, Evelyn. I do think at times with that situation as well. On one hand, sometimes I feel like Melania went along with that, and then at other times, I do think there was pretty certain, rather, that there was frustration on her part as well, and a tugging and being resentful and regretting that role in that particular situation, which then actually leads into the other comment that I wanted to make as it relates to all of us. Within our own personal lives, it is important that we honor the sacred femininity and masculinity within ourselves. What I mean by that is within ourselves, allowing for that balance. It means holding both of those aspects in high regard. It means not looking down or on one or the other, or trying to use one or the other to control the other. It means not suppressing, for example, the femininity. So as all of those things that I was just saying, I wasn't just saying them to only shine a light on society or culture. I was also saying them, and to myself as well, to bring that within the consciousness, to be mindful of those things in order to more so live balance from within ourselves. So what that means not buying or believing or thinking is right what it is that I just explained in terms of the Western mindset. Nick mentioned earlier today about knowledge from within and exploring within. That what I just mentioned is to help draw, I guess, the picture together. Is bringing balance, ensuring balance from within, to be able to see clearly with the third eye, that inner sense. Finish.
Any more comments or questions, statements? Are you clear on what's being said? Okay. Let me attempt to conclude this by saying everything taken together looks like we are closer to this balance than we think. This is not so much about individuals as it is about the energy that they represent. And our mindset cannot be based upon the individual Trump or the individual Melania. Our mindset is based upon the energy that they represent. And the balancing of that energy brings us to harmony. If we are looking at individuals, we've lost sight of the big picture. The bigger picture is not about changing individuals. It's not about changing structures. It's about changing mindsets so that humanity, the welfare and well-being of humanity is at the forefront of all thought. And that being the case, everything will be brought to order, and no one will be lost. No one will be demonized, and no one will have to endure the pain and suffering that so many has endured as a result of the type of society we live in. And I'm not only talking about Native Americans and enslaved people. I'm talking about poor people, period. I'm talking about people who are so blind they cannot see that they are fighting against their self-interest. It is my desire, I hope our desire, that we bring this to a place of harmony so that eyes will be open, but violence will be a thing of the past. No vengeance. And I believe that the greatest vengeance that you can wreak on anyone is to bring them to a clarity of who they are, and they look back at themselves and wonder, how in the world was I that blind? Any other questions or comments? Last two things I want to say is the women are not allowed to be ushers in Southern Baptist churches. Women only can teach women, and they cannot teach men. Women are obedient to the men, the deacons, the men, the pastor, the men, the assistant pastor. They are obedient or submissive to them. And even the pastor, the so-called spiritual leader, is subject to the demands of the deacons, and it is the males who are deacons. So we see all of these things in play, and we see the source of all of these things, and we see the justification for these things, and we understand that the sources and justifications are antithetical. So it is our responsibility to make sure that we continue this journey of bringing a deeper experience of spirituality into this earth realm. And that is done by embracing the energy of the universe and seeking with all our hearts, with all our desires, that energy permeates the atmosphere of this earth, thus changing the earth consciousness, the awareness of how we perceive each other to be and our perceptions of the servitude of the earth. Questions or comments? Second thing, tomorrow is the first Sunday. So we will be on tomorrow at 3 o'clock after we finish our morning discussion that starts at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Questions?
Reverend Richards, what about Monday?
Monday. No, we won't be on Monday.
Okay.
Any other
Pastor
questions?
Richard, can I say something for, I want to say something about something I saw before we get off.
Go ahead.
Okay. I saw, on this video, it was this, I'm pretty sure it's just not black women, but it was the young lady, she was at the zoo with her kids, and this man was following her. He had been following her through this whole, I guess, since she been there. So she had a phone up, she was recording, and he was still coming towards her. So she went up to the zoo security, and she asked them, was this man right here, did he work there? And they said no. So they got security to walk her to her car. So when she got to her car, both of her doors had some tissue in it, stuff down in the door, and they said that was they was waiting on the police to come, but it was supposed to be some kind of another video that I saw that was talking like that. It's some kind of chemical that when the woman or whoever touched that door, they immediately go out, and the people that's stalking them take them off. And so she had to wait till the security went out there with her, and she had to wait till the police, but to find out what kind of substance or what was on her doors. And they also said that they put something on the windshield too, the paper, and whatever is in this paper, if you cut your windshield on, it spreads all over your windshield. And you basically can't see anything drive.
Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome.
Reading an article that said, if you see money on the ground, don't pick it up, because a policeman or someone at a store picked up a dollar bill from the ground, and it had been laced with some drug, and the person died before they could get him to the hospital. So just be cautious and leave things where they are. This society that we're in, we are changing it, and this is our purpose. So we see all kind of things bubbling to the surface, and when we bring those things to an end, we'll be able to see with the eyes as well as the eye how different things are. But again, just be cautious, and if you see that dollar laying there or that quarter, leave it there. It's not going to change your life one way or the other, but it may save your life. Thank you. Questions or comments?
Thanks. This is Ramel. Could you repeat about Sunday again? We're going to have our normal 11, and then we'll come back at 3?
No. Speaking to the facilitators about 3 o'clock. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's a bit more clear. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
At 11 o'clock, I'm talking to everyone. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, we will be where we are on the phone, on Zoom. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Bye.